Hello. So today I'll be discussing the policy that was enacted, the vehicle restriction policy that was enacted in Udu, Korea. So to give you a little overview of Korea, specifically Udu, for now, Udu is a small island located on the coast of Jeju, on the Jeju Islands, and is a part of the Jeju province in South Korea. It's widely known for its geographical features like white sand beaches, volcanic rock formations. It's also a traditionally fishing village, which has ancient temples, cultural landmarks, and historical buildings as well. So a lot of people come to Udu, escaping the cities or just to experience the ancient Korean culture. In terms of Korea itself, it's seen an increasing number of tourism over the past years. In 2023 alone, the country tourism market was currently valued at 35.8 million, and it saw an international tourist arrival rise of 1 million by July. This happened for the first time after COVID 19. So we can see that after COVID 19, a lot of people started traveling, and one of the tourist destinations was Korea. And of course, this brought issues in terms of the growth in tourism and how it affects Korea, right? Some of the things that we know that I noted, especially from this research, was that a lot of people came for different reasons. Some of the major reasons were the Seoul Lantern Festival, which a lot of people tend to come and celebrate. The K-pop festivals in the music industry. K-pop has been a big industry. A lot of music. A lot of people like listening to K-pop artists, and as a result of that, a lot of people travel to Korea to see them perform live. And of course, early on this year, January 2024, they hosted the Winter Youth Olympics, and that brought a different demographic of tourists. And then we move on to the issues, of course, sorry, the issues stemming from over tourism. Now that Udu realized that they have a problem with over tourism, some of the issues they were facing were in terms of environmental, they were having problem with the major issues being, littering, staying on the waste management system, damage on the local facilities in terms of be it the infrastructure that they have, or like in terms of pollution, in terms of air, noise, and water, both caused by vehicles and human activity. And infrastructure overload, quality of life for residents had changed, economic dependency. The country had moved to being a tourist country. The island had moved to being a tourist island, and as such, most of its revenue is derived from more tourists coming. But at the same time, it's been hurting it over a period of time. So this graph basically just gives you an overview of when the problem started and where we are now. So just to give you a little rundown, in 2000, early 2000, we start noticing a huge increase in number of tourists coming to Korea, specifically to the islands. 2017, we see an increased number of media posts in terms of people voicing their opinion in terms of like the accidents that they were experiencing, vehicle accidents experienced in Udu. And then in July 2024, the Udu province came up with a plan that they would implement sort of like a policy that would allow the traffic to be managed. Over the period of 2010 and 2025, they tried to monitor the policy they put in place, and what they found out was actually no one was following the rules. In fact, people used it as a way to bribe people to pay them off, especially in the ferry business. In 2016, the Judo province built a task force that was solely that its sole purpose was to address the over tourism in the islands. And what the task force did was it gathered data, analyzed it, and in 2017, it created a policy that had three main points. One being no new car rental businesses were to be allowed on the island. 30 out of 100 rental cars were to be transferred to the main islands, and two-wheelers and electric motorcycles were reduced from 300 to 270. The third one was more of a precaution. It's the additional restriction orders, which basically means they're free to add on more measures as time goes by. In 2027, the policy came in act, and in 2028, we see them implementing their first amendment, which was basically them realizing that they could amend it by saying an update which allowed guests traveling with children under the age of 5 and people who had transportation vulnerability or pregnant women to be allowed on the island or to enter the island with a vehicle. And then when we look at the policy design and implementations, what the details for the vehicle restriction policy, what they did is they looked at the vehicle quotes. The way they implemented it is they basically created a vehicle quotation in terms of how many vehicles can the island hold and how many vehicles are we going to permit to be on the island. And to manage this, they created a permit system where you have to apply for a permit. You have to apply for your vehicle to have a permit before you go on the island, and that way they can manage that. And as before, they hadn't done a good job managing it. This time, they created an enforcement mechanism that allowed checkpoints to be there in terms of being on the ferry or in buses, which I'll explain later. Creating different checkpoints on the island to monitor the policy, at the same time monitor the number of vehicles that are coming on. And they also implemented penalties that would be paid to the government or to the island officials or to certain island officials if anyone violated if anyone violated the policy. And then supporting systems, of course, I will talk about it later on. They implemented bringing in more bicycles, electric buses, scooters to help with the transportation of tourists. And then while analyzing the CBA methods and data, they basically looked at the quantitative side and the qualitative side. And the quantitative side being they collected all the data they needed for the research in terms of the sources of data were the traffic and pollution records in terms of traffic flow, vehicle emissions, pollution levels, which were essential for them to make a decision on how many vehicles would be allowed, as well as the island itself on how many vehicles it can accommodate the infrastructure that it has. And then they looked at the qualitative side, which was basically implementing surveys and interviews to understand how people are impacted and how the policy can help address those issues as well. And of course, they also implemented a little of more of economic impact studies, like economic data such as tourism revenue, basic sales, and employment figures, which of course were crucial to the decision that they had to come up with. And then this is just a slide that shows the social costs of the people of Udu. So one of the main things they wanted to do was, as a result of restricting vehicles coming on the island, they decided to invest in electric buses that would allow for transportation of tourists on the island. And this is the social cost of the island, which would be buying the vehicle, buying the vehicle, replacing the buses. Sorry, buying the buses, replacing the buses battery after 18 years. Which would cost 30% of the cost of the bus, and the maintenance in terms of building a facility that would supervise the buses in terms of them docking and charging them, and the bus operators. Basically, all of this equated to right around 16 million, and that was basically the social costs of the Udu Islands. And then we look at the social benefits, which was, we looked at how they would benefit in terms of the bus revenue that they would now have. The traffic congestions went down because there are less cars and just a few more buses that are controlled and have a scheduled time of when they have to be at. And the environmental benefits also increased, with environmental pollution costs reducing as a result of less vehicles being on the island and less emissions. And then assumptions for the CBA. I think some of the things that I think the research didn't really over explain is the fact that they assumed a stability and increase in tourism numbers. They assume that over time, even with these implementations, there'll be still a stable or even an increase in the number of tourists. Business adaptability to the new tourist patterns. They didn't really assume whether some businesses would go out of business or wouldn't accept the new policy, as evidenced before, where we saw that there was a bit of resistance when they implemented it in the beginning. An adequate and adaptability of alternative transportation. When people travel, they want to be comfortable and they want to do what they want to do. Them restricting vehicles and allowing everyone to go on public buses, you don't know. They didn't. I feel like they didn't make an assumption of how that could be implemented in terms of in the future if the buses are seen as dirty or not organized, if the system is still fairly new, if that's going to restrict people from coming to the islands. And then findings from the CBA, basically what the CBA findings were that the environmental impacts had three outcomes. There was a reduction in pollution levels, preservation in natural habitats. Like I said, the ecosystem is an essential part of the islands, and improved in waste management. The economic impacts, the initial cost of implementation was high, but that was offset by the long-term economic benefits, of course, and the diversification of the local economy in terms of before the island was mainly just reliant on revenue from tourists, and now it's still the same, but the research argues that the policy argues that by implementing the buses, they're creating a new revenue stream for the island and creating new jobs as well. The social impact, it enhanced the tourist experience. People can now cycle, walk, be on a bus instead of just being stuck on a car or doing their own thing. They're able to socialize with more with people. They're able to walk and experience the nature and the beauty of the island. Cultural perspective as well, enhanced quality of life for the residents, as the residents are complaining before of the overpopulation, sorry, of the not overpopulation of the islands, but just so much traffic in the islands and the increase in vehicle accidents as well. And then comparative analysis is I looked at two articles, one from Barcelona and one from Venice. The one from Barcelona was started in 2015. The problem they are facing is that there's just too many people coming, too many tourists coming to Barcelona, and there are a lot of ships that are docking and releasing thousands of people into the city. And the problem they've been facing is that there's just so many people in Barcelona, and there's just the infrastructure is not built for the number of people that are there. And what they've seen is that schools that are in the city that have playgrounds in public areas have had to block out those areas to allow the students to have somewhere to play. Home prices have gone up because of an increase in Airbnb demand and an increase in rentals as well. And businesses now have to pay tourism tax, which is about €2. And this is a figure from 2022, but it increases annually. And it generates right around 30 million euros annually. And the problem is that the 30 million is not used to benefit the community, but instead is put back into the advertisement or the tourism industry. In Venice, it was the same issue, or even worse. We saw an increase in tourism, which was driving residents out. In the 1950s, we had about 170,000 residents, and that number has gone down to about 50,000 today. It is the biggest sector. Tourism is the biggest sector in Venice, and that's a major problem for reasons like I said before. If we ever face years like COVID, the city would be would have problems. And implementations, of course, they've tried to put some implementations to help control this, such as you can now actually get fined for riding a bicycle, for feeding pigeons, or for sitting in the public square. And then policy implementations and recommendations. So I said a policy adjustment and fine tuning. So continuously looking at the data and looking at what they can change now, which overflows to stakeholder engagement. I feel like before they just analyze the data and analyze the data and implemented a policy, but stakeholder engagement, allowing the locals to have a point of view, the tourists to have a point of view, and bringing that all together to make a policy update that will allow every stakeholder to benefit. Monitoring and involving as well, using data driven approaches to periodically review the policy achievements and make evidence based adjustments. And of course, resource allocation as well. Allocate resources when need be in terms of infrastructure, if need be, or the roads that they need to develop, or creating an infrastructure that will better support the islands. And then suggestions for improving the efficiency of the program. I said enhance the transportation alternatives. Just the buses are probably just not enough. Create other mechanisms. They did implement bicycles and electric scooters, but be able to implement more cars maybe that are used as taxis for people that might not want to use the buses. Public awareness campaigns. Create platforms that will raise awareness on what the policy is supposed to achieve and why it will benefit the islands. Technological integration, allow for places like the checkpoint that they made in terms of ferries or bus stop, create an automated system that can keep track of that and have real data as opposed to having someone there, and so, as opposed to having someone there who doesn't keep accurate data. We can have a technological system, or an AI that can help collect the data and suggest ways to improve it. And like I said, collective approach and feedback and adaptability, allowing the all stakeholders to have an opinion and have an opinion and also have a say in what the policy should have or should be implemented. And of course, that shouldn't always be the case because governments always have to not everyone's going to have their way, but allowing every stakeholder to have a say would be important. And then in conclusion, were some the things that we saw that the policy helped the G2 islands transform into a carbonless island. It reduced present value of benefit, and the social cost benefit of multiple stakeholders was high. So a lot of stakeholders benefited from this policy, and policy of restricting entry of vehicle is economically sound. So it helped the Edu Island as well as the country as a whole. Thank you.